Hi everybody, this is Kimberly from Starfish Design Embroidery. Let me see if I can get my face in there a little bit. I have a lot of new subscribers. Thank you so much for joining. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so by clicking that little subscribe button down below. If you click the little bell, as Grayson always says, it'll give you a notification. Grayson is my son. You'll hear me talking to him and the canine child in the background all the time. Well, I have a lot of new members joining the group because of various hops and so forth. I like to joke and say I should rename my channel to Hot Mess Express because I'm always a mess here. I work full-time and try and parent full-time. Sometimes that doesn't always happen, so I only get to do this very, very part-time. And so cleaning is always the last thing on our list of stuff to do. But anyway, so you can see I always have tape all over my machine because I use a lot of tape. I one time put my 6-needle machine through my finger. I was very blessed that it went through the side of my finger and did not land me in an emergency room with a very large medical bill trying to get a needle out of it, as has happened to other people. So I tend to overdo it maybe on the tape, but it's necessary. So it occurred to me, I have quite a few new people who have wanted to try and do a design, and they really don't understand this whole in the hoop process, and maybe they've only ever done embroidery designs like putting a pretty picture on a shirt or something, and they haven't done any in the hoop projects. So what we mean by in the hoop means the entire project is in the hoop. Grayson, Bailey's outside barking. It's all done within your embroidery hoop. You don't have to go to your sewing machine and do anything on your sewing machine. Now, I'll add a caveat to that. There are some partial projects where if you want to box the bottom of the bag, for example, there might be instructions to do that on your embroidery machine, or I'm sorry, on your regular sewing machine. Also, most in the hoop bags that are lined require some level of additional sewing to close the birthing hole. Birthing hole being the hole you turn the bag inside out through, or we should say right side out. So to removing this tape, I'm kind of giving you a background here. So what we do with an in the hoop bag, we are trying to build, let me show you how this works in the traditional world. So in a traditional world, you have your lining and you have your exterior material like this, and you would take your zipper and you would apply that face down, meaning the right side face down, and you would stitch along here. You do your lining and you'd stitch along there. So you'd have something that looks like this. Then you open it up and you top stitch. Then you repeat for the other side. Then at the end, you sew it all together. You have something that looks like this. So you have your zipper right here in the middle. You have the lining here, your exterior. Then you do a big old rectangle all around this, leaving enough room to turn the bag inside out. I'm going to periodically check and make sure I'm good in the camera. So that's how you do a zipper pouch in traditional sewing. Well, obviously we can't do that on the hoop because we don't have enough space to stitch all that. Now, some patterns might, if you have a really large hoop, you might have the room to do that for a smaller bag. But most of the patterns are not doing that. So what we do is we have to try and build our 3D zipper pocket in a 2D plane here. And these are the way that we do it. So I'm going to demonstrate how I do it. Now, even among my patterns, I do have a variety of different ways and methods I've done them over the last 2 years that I've been digitizing. It's hard to believe, but yes, it's been 2 years. And this year really got really big for me. But I really want to throw out this caveat. Every digitizer is different. There's so much going on in the embroidery world about so-and-so copied me or this one copied that one. It's so aggravating. I cannot tell you how aggravating it is. And it's very mind-blowing to me because I've never seen that happen in the sewing world. Sometimes, but not a whole lot. I mean, basically a tote bag is a tote bag. There's not a lot of differences. Most clutches look very similar in the sewing world. What sets everything apart is the how we get there part of it. I identify with different seamstress or seams. What's the word? Male version of seamstress, but I identify with different sewists because of the way they sew or teach or write their instructions hits me and makes me, and it's the way I think. Other sewists I don't like as well. There's nothing wrong with them. They're great. They create fabulous bags. It's just our brains are not the same. We don't think the same, so they don't work as well for me. So that's why in the sewing world, you'll see something like this, a simple clutch. There's probably, there's probably 100 patterns out there with something very similar to this. And they're all very similar, but they all have different pattern, different written instructions, different pictures. And those are the things that you can copyright. You cannot copyright this design. It just doesn't work that way. All I can do is copyright my my digital file. You can't use my digital file, change it and sell it as your own. I can copyright my PDF and my pictures. But if somebody else, some other digitizer comes along and makes a bag that looks almost exactly like this, there's nothing I can do because there's not any way to copyright that. You can ask for patents. Patents are very expensive, and you have to be able to provide proof that what you are doing is so different than anybody else. So in the sewing world, it's really hard to get a patent. So anyway, so having said that, get off my soapbox for a minute. Knowing that we all do things differently, do not assume that the way my bag is going to stitch out is the same as another designer's, because we're all different in how we do things. There might be some similarities. Most of us all are going to have a zipper panel here to lay your zipper. Some people only have 2 lines, and you have to lay the zipper in between and evenly space it. Some do 3 lines like I do. I'll tell you why I do 3 lines in a moment. Some of us do a placement line to give you a general idea of how much the bag is going to do. Some of us don't, and even on some of my patterns, I don't always have this. Some curve it down here, some keep it straight. There's just different ways for everybody to do it. So don't ever assume that XYZ digitizing is the same as ABC digitizing. Read the PDF, read the disclaimers, read the disclosures. There may be some bags that you just can't do on a single needle machine. Now, this is a 500E Janome. It's a lot more powerful than my 350E Janome. And the dog is over here sniffing for some reason. So, make sure I'm still in the view good. So I can do a lot more things with it. Sorry, let me try and adjust this a little bit. I can do a lot more things with it than I can with the 350. It's just more powerful. But I have upstairs, I have my 6-needle, multi-needle Brother machine. That machine is incredibly powerful, and it's made to go through very heavy materials, so it can do a lot more. So I say that because you need to know the limits of your machine. A machine like this was designed to do embroidery only. It's not going to necessarily be able to go through 5 layers of vinyl to do a bag. But some of the combo machines that are designed to do sewing and embroidery, those are a little bit more powerful because they're designed to do sewing, so they might be able to do that. So you need to know the limits of your machine. Now, I have a 90-14 needle in here because I'm not doing any embroidery work. I prefer 75-11, and I just use a universal. I will tell you, I do prefer the embroidery needles, so I'll either use a universal or an embroidery needle. The embroidery needle has a wider opening, and it has like a little place, a groove for the thread to lay, so your thread doesn't shred as much in those. But when I'm doing bag making, if I'm doing a bag where I'm going to do an embroidery design on it, I start with a 75-11. But when I get over to the construction of the bag, I move to a 90-14 because the needle is thicker. So it's going to be able to penetrate more layers of material than the 75-11. And in most bag making, you use the 90-14. So that's just one thing. So next thing, so we talked about the needle. Thread. Most of us use some type of embroidery thread. Floriani, Isocord, they're polyester. Then you have Madeira that has both polyester and rayon. I bring this up because rayon is known to be a very stretchy thread, especially when it's wet. Beautiful embroidery designs with it. It has a sheen to it. It's really pretty, but probably not the best thing to use for construction of a bag. So I highly recommend you stick to the polyester. I actually do a mixture here because I do testing, and I've bought all my machines secondhand, and with all of them I've ended up getting thread. So I'm just kind of, I go through the cheaper thread for my testing and save my better stuff. But definitely keep that in mind. We prefer polyester thread when you're going to be doing any kind of bag making. Tape is very helpful for holding it down. I don't have a sample of my pink embroidery perfection tape right here, but everybody uses different things. I really like this 3M transport tape. It works well, especially for cloth, and you can reuse it multiple times. But regular blue painter's tape works well. And then the embroidery perfection, which is a pink tape, it works, it works really great on vinyls. The one thing I want you to be aware of though, a lot of the tape on the really shiny vinyls will leave a residue. So be mindful of that. Try not to leave the tape on there for a long time, or tape it in an area that's going to get cut off later. So keep that in mind. Some people like the white medical tape. I've tried that. I did not care for it. I thought it got very gummy, and this stuff, if you needle through it, I can pull it right off. It doesn't get stuck in my stitches like the masking tape does. So it's why it's become my favorite. And then let's see. So now let's move on to zippers. So if you're going to do a bag, you need a zipper, right? So just about any bag is going to tell you that you need a zipper that's going to be about 2 inches wider than your bag. So the reason being, so if we go here, let me pull the ruler up here, and we go 2 inches, 1 inch, see that where that ends, and 1 inch here. The reason you do that is because that affords us to be able to keep that zipper pull out of the way while we stitch the bag. Now, in this particular bag, and in a lot of the bags, you're going to go ahead and put your zipper down. You're going to do all your work, and then right before the end, you're going to pull the zipper pull over to the middle to open that up. Not all bags are like that. My most recent bags, Victoria and Midge, use zipper tabs right here. Where's Midge at? Zipper tabs. And it gives a cleaner finish over here for an in the hoop bag. And with that, we actually move the zipper over while we're constructing the bag. The zipper will get moved back and forth. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then finally, most bags, you're going to want some type of way to hold the bag. So we usually use a D-ring, or some people go straight to the lobster clasp. I think I'm going to go with a D-ring here, but let me show you the difference here. If I can get my bag open. So this is a lobster clasp, and there's all various, I got right in the light there. There's all various types of lobster clasp. This is just one. It's also called a trigger clasp. So you can put, this is 3/4 inch, so you could use a 3/4 piece of material, whatever your material is going to be. People often use FOE, flexible fold over elastic, or you use a piece of vinyl or cloth. So if you see here, I used vinyl, and I reinforced that vinyl with some stabilizer, and I use these D-rings. So I'm going to use a really little D-ring here just to show you how to do that. This is a 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to use a piece of scrap leftover material. I did not cut that yet, so I'm just going to rough cut it for a 1/2 inch. And you want about 3 to 4 inches long, and I'll explain that when we get to that step, why it needs to be that long and how to determine how long you need it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this through here and get this ready. Now this is just a little coin pouch, so I don't need to worry about reinforcing the vinyl, but if you're using cloth or vinyl, you need to make sure this strap is going to be strong enough. So we're just going to set this aside here, and that's ready to go. So what we would normally do, and I'm going to swap out this finished zipper, which has the stops on both ends, in lieu of this pretty zipper tape that I have. Zipper tape is just, it's zipper tape by the yard. This stuff is actually called tape. This is the tape or the ribbon, and then this is your coil. So in this case, you actually just cut it to the size you need, and you add that on. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this down here, and I'm going to show you how I do this. Now on my bags, I always have a middle placement line. I actually prefer not to have a top placement line on these small bags because it affords me to make the bag taller on these 4x4 inch hoops. But for the sake of clarification and simplicity, I added the top zipper line for the placement for you. So normally what you would do is you would go ahead and center this zipper in between those two lines. That's what most people tell you to do. I don't know if I have a sample here to show you, but what happens is that sometimes, no, this one's 1 inch. Sometimes your zipper tape is not actually 1 inch wide. So when you do that, if you center it in there, there's a space on either side. You can't be assured that it's really centered. So this is what I instruct to do. I secure the end on one end, just to hold it. You might have to move this down the road, but right now we're just going to secure this piece. And this is a really short zipper. Normally I just put one piece at each end, but for the interest of demonstration, I'm going to show you how I do this. So I'm tearing this into skinny pieces. What I do is I hope I can show this to you. I make sure that the center piece of that seam right down the middle goes along that center stitch line. And it's hard to do that on the camera. I have to kind of turn it and look at it. So I do what I call walk the zipper down the tape. So right here is the middle line in the middle of your zipper, whatever. You can see where it's at. That's where your teeth are. And you want to make sure that that line is right on top of your middle stitch line. And if you do that, and you just walk it down that line, then you know your zipper is going to be even. Again, this is how I do my zippers. I cannot tell you how other people do it. This is how I do it. So, and you can see, so now I'm going to tape on both sides. And down here, it did get a little puffy right there. I hope you can see that. So I'm going to pull this tape up and reposition that, because if I don't, then I'm going to have that puffiness is going to be in my actual finished bag. Now I'm going to put a piece of tape down here, and I'm going to cover up that pole because I'm using a dangly pole, and I don't want it to dangle around and loosen around and get on my machine underneath the foot when I'm stitching. So I'm just using a big enough piece of tape that's going to cover that up and secure it down. Okay. So now what most stitchers have, actually funny enough, I did it in my first few bags, and I finally realized you really need it, is a basting stitch to hold this to the stabilizer. Y'all, I forgot the most important thing, the stabilizer. I have tried lots of things over the years, and what I have come to like the best is poly mesh. Not fusible, just regular poly mesh. Because if the stabilizer, this is my determination factor, whether I use tearaway or poly mesh. If the stabilizer is going to stay inside the bag, I use poly mesh because it's soft and it doesn't give any hard crinkly to your bag. If the stabilizer is going to get torn out of the bag, like an unlined bag, then tearaway is great. It's a little bit more affordable than the poly mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Now, I'm going to warn you ahead of time, my machine is being a real brat lately, and it's wanting to not stay stitched. So I'm trying to help it along by holding the thread to get it going. And this is just going to stitch our zipper to the stabilizer. Now I can already tell mine is off a little bit, but I'm not gonna, in the interest of time, I'm not gonna redo it. But I will show you what I mean. And this is the time when you can go ahead and change it and fix it. So I did not get it as clean as I would like to. And if you'll notice, the stitching is closer to the edge down here than it is over there. So I'm gonna just go with it, like I said, because of the interest in time. But if you chose not to do that, because what's gonna happen is the zipper reveal, how much space between the material you see is not gonna be even. Now, this is what we call a top zip bag. The zipper is at the top of the bag. It's not opening at the top. It opens forward facing, but the zipper is located at the top. I like to call this a faux top zipper. Okay, so now we've done that. We're gonna go ahead and attach our lining. Just as if we were sewing a bag on a sewing machine, our lining is still gonna go to the back. This is where it gets tricky. You have to turn over your hoop and attach your lining to the back of the hoop. So we have the bottom and the top of the zipper tape here. The bottom lining is gonna get aligned wrong side with the topmost piece to the bottom of it, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach this here, we're gonna do a stitch, and then we're gonna turn this, fold it down, and that becomes our folding line. So you have to place it so the right or pretty side is facing the stabilizer, and you have it centered over this bottom zipper line. And then we're going to tape it down. Now, you might need to, depending on where your hoop connection is at, you might have an issue with this fabric hanging over the top. If you, like on my 350E, the hoop was at the top. So what you might have to do is fold the material on the back of the hoop and neatly tape it down like that. So it's not in your stitch area. Your stitch area is going to be right here. And you can tell that by looking at the next stitch on the machine or by looking at the PDF. Now, every digitizer is going to give you a PDF with instructions on how to do the file. Ideally, you're going to get a very complete PDF, not just a stitch map. A stitch map is just a listing of all the steps that you're going to go through. We have 10 color stops in this project, and we're only using one color because in the hoop project, a color stop is a way to make the machine stop so that you can take some action. We just did a color stop to baste our zipper down. That's very important to know on those multi-needle machines where you can program it to just go. You don't want to do that doing a bag. You need to pay attention. Make sure it doesn't color sort your file. What I mean by that is if the digitizer has used the same color for representing different steps, like the same color for placements versus satin stitches, if your machine color sorts it, it's going to get the steps all out of order. So make sure the number of steps that shows on your machine matches the stitch map or the PDF. So now that we have the lining there, we're ready to add our exterior material. And I'm using this vinyl, this really pretty new parlor paper from My Punk Broidery. I do primarily buy from My Punk Broidery. I buy from a few other people here and there, but mostly I buy from My Punk Broidery. So we're gonna go ahead and likewise, we did on the back, we're gonna put this face down and so it's along the bottom edge of the zipper. So if you're using a directional material, put it the way you want it, the direction, it needs to go that way. Then just flip it like this and then you'll know it's right. I'm going to reuse this piece of tape over here because we don't need it anymore. But I'm not going to let go of the tape over on the other side because that's holding down my zipper pull. And what I should have done is use a lighter at the end of the zipper tape and fused it so it didn't come unraveled like it just did. Okay, now I'm going to get another piece of tape, and I go through a lot of this tape, and I'm going to tape it down over here. Now, in truth, on a small project like this, you could almost get away with not doing that, but I say better safe than sorry. If you're doing a very long bag, you'd probably want to put another piece of tape right in the center as well. Again, I'm going to hold this thread just because my machine's been being a little bit snotty lately. Not wanting to hold the thread. Okay, so now this is just our tack down. And again, not all bags are going to have the same steps. So traditionally you do a tack down and then a top stitch. But every bag is different. This particular bag, I decided to do a faux quilting on the vinyl. So by faux, I mean I'm not adding any quilting batting in here, but it is digitized, so you could. So if you chose to do so, of course I don't have any handy to show you. Let's just pretend this is batting. We'll use this. If you chose to put batting in here, you would do so at this time. And you would take and put your batting so it's just under that line, because we do not want that seam to be really thick with the batting, else it won't lay down properly. So I'm going to loosen up this tape and should be able to reuse it. And then that tack down line just created a fold line for me. So I'm going to fold this down. Now normally we'd be top stitching right here, but since I'm doing this quilting motif, we're not. So your batting would be here. You would fold this down. Always hold your hoop against a firm surface and then finger press this. So let me get this lining material out of the way, and I'm going to do just that. And then I'm going to put this tape down. And because I didn't redo my zipper when it was not even, you can see here that it's not, the reveal of the zipper is not even. I'll show you in a second. Because I didn't redo it, that step. You can already see that it's not. See, it's a little curvy, but that's okay. Now I'm going to keep my lining out of the way because we don't want to quilt through that. We only want to quilt through our top. So this is going to take a couple minutes to run. Just a simple quilting motif I did. And this is actually the first time I've stitched this, so if there's any bugs, that would be why. I've already did the backing, and I used a sashiko stitch for that, but it took a lot of thread and took too long, and the benefit wasn't worth it, so I changed it over to just a beam stitch. So, while it's doing that, let's talk a minute about vinyl on in the hoop project. There are all types of vinyls out there. You have your marine vinyl, which I don't have a sample of right now. Wait, do I? I do. Okay, so this is a marine vinyl. It usually has some type of woven backing, and it's a little bit thicker. This is a thinner one than most. These are a little bit, you can totally do these on the single needle machine for the most part, but you don't want to have many layers of this. So if you're doing a layer and then with cotton inside, you're fine. But there's some marine vinyls that are much thicker than that. This is also a marine vinyl. This is from another vendor called marinevinylfabrics.com. This is similar to the promo vinyl from My Punk Embroidery in thinness, but this one is actually a marine vinyl. Marine vinyl has a coating on it to protect it from the sun. So if you look at the difference, you can kind of see the difference in the thickness of these. The first one is marine vinyl from My Punk Embroidery, and the second one is marine vinyl from marinevinylfabrics.com. Now, these other materials have like a flannel backing. This is actually probably one of my most favorite vinyls. This is Pink Lemonade Metallic, and look at it. It doesn't wrinkle. Well, it kind of does, but not much. It has a beautiful iridescence. Has like a felt-like backing to it, and it's beautiful for bag making. If you are going to use heavy satin stitching though, please add another piece of cutaway underneath it to make sure that it sorry, lost my train of thought from the child. To make sure that it supports it. So I've gone ahead and stitched out this, and I'm going to make this a top stitch, a different color stop, because what I should have had this be different so you could put the lining down and have that top stitch go through the lining as well. That just helps hold it down more. So I'm going to pull the lining down. So we're going to go ahead, turn to the back of the hoop again, and we're going to take this tape off that we used to hold it down. And you can see the back of the stitching there. Then carefully, because we have nothing against to hold this against, we're going to carefully use our fingernail or some other device, boning tool, to crease at that fold. Now, this is not going to get stuck in our zipper. Well, it might because I messed it up. But by the time you read the file, you're going to have folded this down and then run that last top stitch so that it goes through the lining too, and that helps keep the lining out of the zipper. So now I have not changed my color, but I'm going to run the step for the D-ring placement. Most bags are going to have some step for placing your D-ring, your hardware. Not all. Some digitizers just let you decide where you want to put it, and you put it on the last step. I don't like that method. I like to know where it's going, and I like to put it on. I'm going to trim this material, this extra threads. Now, it's going to be hard for you to see because I did use the same color, but when you're up close to it, you'll be able to see that right there is that extra stitching. So we're going to take our little D-ring, and we're going to put that there. And the raw edge is going to be on the outside of our bag. This is the inside of our bag. The raw edge is going to be on the outside. Now, how far away from that line? This line, if you look at the file, this line is about the same place as the final stitching line is going to be. So how far away from this line can you have this little D-ring? It's a very good question. Grayson, and this is how you find out. You need to take and figure out how wide your presser foot is. My presser foot on this Janome 500E is just under, sorry, I had it on the half side. It's harder to see. So it's just under 1/4 of an inch wide from that angle, and I believe the other angle as well because it's round. But you see you have this front to back on the back side. That makes it closer to 3/8 of an inch. So we're going to round it off, and we're going to say we want that. We need enough room for that presser foot to do our stitch and bypass this by at least 3/8 of an inch. So we're going to round that up and say 1/2 an inch. Now, how that then determines is how wide your strap is above the opening. I prefer to have it as close as possible, but some people actually do like having the extra long straps. So your mileage is going to vary. My 350E, the presser foot was about 1/2 an inch to an inch almost. It was square. So I had to have a longer loop on my my bags. And that's the one area that varies from when you're doing it on a sewing machine. On a sewing machine, you can get really close and determine where to put that D-ring because you can get a lot closer on your sewing machine. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to put my tape right over the placement stitch. That was cut a placement stitch because I want the presser foot to be able to glide over this hump really easily. So I put a large piece of tape, I call it a bridge, and it's going to be able to help that presser foot glide over that lump of that extra material. So again, make sure that your bottom hasn't come loose when you're playing around with your hoop like this. We're going to put it back on our arm. I'm going to hold my thread because my machine is being a brat. And then we're going to run the next color stop, which we're up to number 6. Now I have this Janome, and I'm going to tell you in a second when it's done. Watch how my presser foot moves. Okay, this time it was okay. It went straight up. This presser foot, in order to draw the tail for the cutting, the presser foot moves the hoop all over like this. The presser foot, and what happens is sometimes it hits that that D-ring. And when that happens, that can be really bad. You can tear your needle. Or break your needle. That's the most minimal thing to happen. But that needle could get caught in your machine down below. It could throw your timing off. It's a bad situation to happen. So if you have this machine or another machine similar to it that does that, I can go ahead and watch where this is at. I can lift it up higher. And I lift it up as soon as I hear the thread cutters finish. And that way I know it's not going to hit my hardware. Okay, so we've stitched down our D-ring. Now we're ready to stitch our exterior panel and our lining backing. So we're going to go ahead and turn this over to the back, and we're going to put our lining down. And again, this is going to be right side down. The pretty side is going to be facing down. And again, we're going to center that over our top of our zipper now. We're going to center it over the top. Now, some of my bags, I do put a tick mark to indicate where the middle is. It just depends on the importance of it. But I try to err on the side of generosity with my cutting instructions so that you have plenty of room to center it. And again, if you're doing a really long bag, you might need to put another piece of tape here. So turn it over. You can put more tape down here if you want. I find it's not necessary. I just hold it while I'm turning it over and turn it over. Now take your other exterior. In my case, I actually quilted this, so I'm going to try and line up this top edge of the quilting with the top of my zipper. Or actually, what I would do is I would cut this down. I'm going to do that actually by 1/4 of an inch, so that hopefully if I line it up right, the stitching, the quilting will be even. So go ahead and cut this down by 1/4 of an inch if you have a pen handy. And it's a complete square, so it doesn't really matter which side you cut from the top or whatever. This pen is not working. That's good enough. Okay, so I had about 1/8 inch extra at the top, so my quilting would not have lined up very well. Now, you may not have done quilting. You don't have to do quilting, just extra. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and line it up with the top of my zipper. And you can see the exterior right here. I can make sure that that exterior matches this as well, just to make sure it's centered where it's going to line up well when we're done. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tape that down. See, I go through a lot of this tape. I try to reuse it as much as I can, get my usage out of it. And then this is the part where I differ from a lot of digitizers. I stitch this down first. Now I'm going to do 2 rows of stitching because we're doing this the easy way. But this is actually digitized, that if you were wanting to, you could put a back, a top stitch on the back. And I did not line that up well because that actually ended up coming into the, it went into the inside it, but that's okay. So there's 2 sections of stitching here. Okay, so I need to change that color. That should have actually been a different color stop, and it's not. You should have had 2 color stops here. So what would happen is if you wanted to have top stitching up here on the back of your bag, what you would do is you would have ran that first step, then you would have flipped this up and then flipped up the lining and then ran the second step and did the top stitching. But I'm not doing that here. Oh, I have a little loose thread there. Okay, so what we've done now is we've secured our top. So we can now move our zipper pole and get it out of the way so that we can stitch the rest of our bag. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the tape now from the zipper pole. And I'm not going to lose all this tape because remember, I have a jingly dangly zipper pole and I don't want that to potentially get loose. This is a really narrow bag and I don't want it to get loose in the center of my bag and run into something. So I'm going to put just a tiny piece of tape to hold that pole in place. Be careful though, because if you have a glossy vinyl, this tape will leave residue. So then you want to use, put it on the zipper. So let's remove this tape over here. We're going to leave our back up. So we're going to go to the back. We don't want to close our lining right now. We're just going to close the front. So we're going to go ahead and pull this lining up. Again, finger press it to get that little crease there. I'm going to put this tape down here to hold that up out of the way. See that? Hold it here however you need to so it doesn't get hung up. Then we're going to take and we're going to put our tape on the sides of this to hold this down. And the more the better, because we have that jingly jangly pull inside there as well as the D-ring, and you can see how that adds some volume to the bag and it makes the exterior want to puff up. And then what happens is you kind of get a little bit extra puffiness in your bag, which you don't want. So I just try to make sure you're against a firm surface when you're doing this, because you don't want your project to come out of the hoop. So I have tape all the way around it. I'm going to pull this lining up again, make sure it doesn't get stuck under there. And now we're going to stitch just the side and bottom of the exterior panel. And it did not line up my quilting well. That's okay. I apparently did not need to cut off that. Oh, what happened? It looks like it's too far over here. Oh, I guess it's not. Sorry. I thought it was getting too close to that D-ring. It threw me off because I didn't lay this down right. Oh, it shouldn't be going around again. Somehow I added an extra stop in there. It won't be in there when you get the file. Okay, so, but you see how close it got to that D-ring. The D-ring is right here, and the stitching is right there. So now, what we're going to do is go to our back. Our front is all stitched together, and this is a part you have to be very careful, especially if you're using cutaway. You need to be able to open up your zipper. So we need to get rid of the stabilizer behind the zipper. So what I do is I just get to the end of the zipper here, and I put my seam ripper underneath gently and poke it in just so I can see the silver of my seam ripper underneath there. And then you can just glide it right across. You want your ball on the top and glide it right across to the end. If that's scary for you, then just get some small scissors, can't speak, and use them and just cut very slowly. And because I didn't lay my bag down, my zipper down well the first time, you can see it's actually really close because I can see the zipper pull in here. The same thing over here. You just, sometimes it helps to get the snips and get a little start with your scissors just to get it started. And then I get my seam ripper in here with the ball on the top, and I just glide it right along, holding on to this stabilizer, and I just glide it right along to the end. Whatever you do, don't cut through your zipper tape, because that would be very bad right now. And now you see it's open. So now we're ready to do our final stitch. So we're going to go ahead and put our lining back down. This time we want to pull it tautly, because that way we make sure the lining is not baggy inside. So pull this tape out and reuse it if you can. And again, I'm pulling it tautly and taping it down. And you'll notice that the last time around, our stitch came just shy of the zipper line. So this time it's going to go ahead and go around the entire top. Make sure the lining has not come loose. And here we go. Keep your fingers out of the stitch path. Ideally, you shouldn't have them anywhere near there. Get a purple thingamajig or whatever you need to do. See how that moved that? That's what I was talking about. It moves around there. Now, this time, we're leaving an opening by which we're going to turn the bag inside out. So that's why we couldn't have the lining down before, else it would have sewn it all the way closed. Now, you're going to see there's another step on this bag. It's number 10. We're not going to run that step. All that step was for when your embroidery project is all done, your almost all machines come back to the center of the hoop. Well, when you do that, we have all this hardware in here. This foot could get stuck on that, and we don't want that to happen. So we add that extra step, and you just stop, and you're done now. Before we unhoop anything, we want to turn over and look at the back of our project and make sure everything's stitched properly. So we have this nice big opening to turn it with. I left it open since this is a beginner project. And then on the front, everything looks good. Everything looks good, then we can go ahead and take it out of our hoop. If it did not look good and something was messed up, you just get your seam ripper, pull it out, and redo it. Now, I have some generous pieces of poly mesh up here, and this stuff is not cheap. So I'm going to go ahead and do a bulk trim and trim off some of these pieces. And what I do is I save those. So like for Midge or for Victoria with the satin stitching, I will put this extra poly mesh underneath it to give it some extra support when I'm doing that satin stitching. So I'm going to just cut off these big chunks that I can, and then I'll come in and do the final trim on the bag. And it's best to take any of the tape off. If you don't take the tape off, you might forget it in there, and then what will happen is over time it'll get gummy and it could seep through onto your materials, and you don't want that to happen. So take the tape off wherever you can find it. And so this poly mesh is not worth saving over here. All right, I didn't get the tape on the back. Okay, so now I have the tape off. So to make it easier to close the turning hoe, a technique I learned from sewing is you make a little notch here, and it gives you a little bit more material to hold on to when you're turning the hoe. We don't need it to be this thick, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off a nice portion here because I just randomly cut the material. Okay, so what I mean is, and this vinyl is expensive, so I'm going to go ahead and trim this a little bit because I can cut off enough pieces to reuse that for something else. This piece here is plenty big enough to use for a key fob, or this for a loop. Okay, so anyway, back to this. So now what we want to do is we want to put in go in at the into the stitching at an angle like that, and then over here the same thing, just an angle. See that? Now you can come back over to the front and trim. And we're using vinyl, so we want to trim it down to about somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 inch from that last seam line. And it's best to do this right over a trash bin because you don't want these little pieces to get down in your machine. So I like to generally leave the zipper tape a little bit extra long in there. So I'm going to fold that back out of the way while I trim this side. And then I'll trim this. The same with the D-ring, but I left that D-ring wasn't too thick. So again, I'm trimming it. And it looks really wonky because I didn't lay down my quilting evenly. Saved some of these pieces. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and pull my zipper tape this way and trim the back even. And then I'll trim my zipper tape. It doesn't need to be that long. But this way I make sure I don't cut into my zipper tape. And the reason you do that is there's a lot of force put on the zipper tape. And if it's really cut close to this, it could actually pull inside. So now I'm just going to go ahead and cut off and leave about 1/2 inch of the zipper tape loose like that. Now come back down to the bottom and trim off this last little section. Right up to our little angle. All right, now we don't need all of this to be long, only the lining. So if you fold the lining back, you can then go ahead and trim the rest of the bag to that 1/8 to 1/4 inch. Don't get your lining in there, okay? So this is what it looks like on the front. This is what it looks like on the back. We can trim off these corners of the vinyl only. Do not cut into your zipper tape. So you just want to cut the vinyl. You can do the material too, but just fold it out of the way so you're not catching your zipper tape. But anything that we can do to reduce the bulk helps for a cleaner finish. Now I got really close down here, not over here, so I don't need to trim it too much, but just for the sake of knowledge, I'm going to show you how to notch it. What I actually prefer to do is notch the curves. I put a slight curve in here just so I can show you this. So to notch it, you just take your scissors and you come in at like about a 33-degree angle, and you just trim it and then come at the other end and you create a 60-degree angle. Who said you wouldn't use geometry again? Create a 60-degree angle into the curves. And what that does is it takes away a lot of this material inside and allows that seam to spread out. But do not cut into your stitching. So this is a bag making technique. I worry about it because I always worry, well, how is that seam going to be there's not a lot of material there, but this is a typical bag making technique. Okay, so we have everything trimmed down as best as we're going to have it. You can trim off your extra threads. I don't know how I got that green in there. Now we're ready to turn the bag right side out. So we're first going to turn it inside out so that lining side comes out. This is where hemostats come in handy. Hemostats are used in surgery and other medical needs. I like this pair the best. They have a rounded blunt edge on the top. And what happens is you pull them together. They lock together with this little crimp in here. So what you do is you go inside, and I like to grab the material that's the thicker side, the exterior, and I pinch it up inside in between the two hemostats. Just get a section of it and pinch them in there, and then you lock the hemostats together. And basically this creates like a third hand for you. So now you can start to pull that corner out through the hole as if you had another hand. So you can hold on to here and fold with both hands to fold that hole out. If you've ever done any kind of bag before, or a quilt, birthed a quilt or a blanket, it's the same concept. So now that I have that much pulled out, I can let these hemostats go and just use my hands. If you have arthritic hands, did I say that right? Arthritic hands? Then keep using the hemostats. If this is hard for you, keep pulling the hemostats, reposition them and get them inside the bag. If you tear the seam, the turning hole seam, it's not the end of the world. That's what glue and tape are for, to fix, or hand stitching. So go ahead and just work it out gently and it'll turn. I left a nice large birthing hole on this one for you guys. All right. So we're almost all the way out. Now what I find, and it may just totally be in my head, I find if I take the time to really press out the corners and the edges while it's inside out with the lining side, I get a better result at the end. So now push these together and lock them. Now you have this nice rounded edge, and you reach inside and use that to help push out your edges, your corners and everything. See? And just do that all the way around. And just reach it in there. And then once you're satisfied with where you're at there, and see I don't have very much here, I left you a big turning hole, then you can turn it right side out. I do not close my bag until I'm totally done, so I turn it inside out twice, because if there's something wrong, I want to be able to fix it. But in the nature of time, I'm going to go ahead and just show you what you would do then. When you close it, I take the side that the stitches is on, and I fold that in, and I use glue, but you can use hand stitching it as well. So if you're hand stitching it, put a few pins in here, and then just do a ladder stitch. What I do is I use glue, and I tuck this in, make sure all the raw edges are tucked in. I put the glue along here on this side, and then I fold in the edge, and I do about a couple inches at a time, and then I put a clamp on there. And this is the glue I use. Fabri-Tac by Beacon, and it has a quick set, and it sets about 20 minutes, and then it takes 24 hours to cure. And so then I just go ahead and do that all across and put some crimps on there, these things, to hold it in place. So, but I don't do that until I'm all the way done. I want my bag to be perfect. And if I turn it right side out and see that I somehow got a seam wrong, I've already glued it closed, I'm done. So now remember, I taped that zipper pull down, so I need to loosen that up inside. And I should have opened the zipper pull a little bit farther than it is. But you want to go ahead and get your zipper to open the rest of the way from inside. And you just work in there with your finger. And mine's a little bit more difficult because I taped it closed. So, and again, this is probably where I can get that hemostat in there and loosen it up as well. Why is this? Where's that tape at? I'm trying to show you guys and do this at the same time. All right. That zipper pull once did not come loose. There it goes. I guess I really taped it down, didn't I? This is my first time working with this parlor paper vinyl. So that tape, that sticky stuff really stuck to it. Okay. So now I should be able to push this from the inside. And the jingly ones are a little bit harder to do than the straight ones. But you just push it and open it up the rest of the way. And it really does work. I know it's not looking like it, but it does. Oh, it's like not wanting to do it for some reason. Sometimes if you start to pull it towards you, and then the leverage was there, like that. So I pulled it towards me and then it got leverage. Okay, so now go ahead and open it up as far as you can. Sometimes you won't be able to get all the way open because you still need to work this corner out. And then turn it right side out. So now you're going to turn it the right side out. And this is a really small pouch, but it's a perfect beginner project. All right, now it's all gobbledygook, so get our little hemostats. Now you can actually get them, if you're having trouble getting in a corner, you can actually put the hemostats through the opening because we left it open, and that makes it easier to get the corners out if you have trouble. Sometimes you can get it right through the lining, it's no problem. This is working out well. So see, that corner's nice and rounded. Now work over here. And I like to use my fingers for the bulk of it and only use the hemostats when I get down to where my finger can't work anymore. And then again, just put the hemostats in there, or some other rounded chopstick or something like that, something with a rounded edge. Try not to use scissors. I know people do that, but I've accidentally cut through bags from doing that. Okay, now we have both ends are nice and rounded out. Now, this zipper end here, I don't have tabs in here, but tabs are easier, but you can still pop it out a lot more than that. Take the hemostats, push them inside so they're right here underneath the zipper. So push them in there, and then with your thumb, hold on to the zipper on top and push, pop, I like to call it pop open that seam, and it'll pop right up for you. And then just push gently until you don't get any more resistance in there. And that's as far as you're going to get it. And the same thing over here. This one actually turned out really nicely. But the same thing. Put your finger there and pop that seam if you need to. This one actually ended up coming out by itself nicely because I had turned the lining first. All right. I don't know why I have that extra. Make sure you cut these little, trim away these little pieces here, because your zipper will get stuck in them. I don't extra thread there. Okay. And then go ahead and close it up. And there you go. How cute is that? Adorable little coin pouch. I'll trim my extra threads. But if for some reason something wasn't stitched as nicely as you wanted it to be, you could turn it right side out again and fix it. And then you have a little D-ring. So, you know, this is a good size for, I don't have my credit cards. I don't know if this will fit a credit card because it may, because I didn't, of course I don't have a sample one sitting here, a card. I usually have a credit card sitting here. I'll double check it, but it may not. So let me get it close to the camera for you. See how cute that is? But you can put change or whatever, hang it in your kid's backpack and that sort of thing. How gorgeous is that? Okay, guys, if you have any questions, visit my Facebook group, Starfish Designs Embroidery Group, and I will have the file there in a couple of days. Today is, I think, the 17th. I actually need to do the PDF, and I'll have to take screenshots from this video to do the PDF. So hopefully this will be a great project for you. Thank you very much. Again, subscribe to the channel if you like my style. If you don't like my style, I'm not going to cry about it. There's plenty of other digitizers out there to service you. And I hope you all have a good holiday. Thanks. Bye-bye.